All right, welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be going over some different stuff, moving on to one of the last things we'll learn in HTML. And to do that, we're going to take a look at our web page. This just get that out of the way. All right. So here we have our page, and again, it's looking nice and clean, but there's not a whole lot on here because we moved some stuff previously to the hobbies page and the contact page. Now, what we want to do would be, this contact page, this is the email ad or the address of the school. We got the school phone. I got my email. But what would be nice is if somebody could contact me through some type of form like this. So today we're going to be learning how to put in a form using HTML. Now, just like everything else with HTML, we can structure a form, we can put it in there, we can do some really basic things. But until we learn some of the later stuff like CSS and JavaScript, which give those forms a behavior, we can't do a whole lot with it. So we need to first learn what the forms are actually made of and how we do that stuff. To do that, we're going to use what is called a form and input tag. So if we go to MDN and look at the documentation for forms, you can take a look and scroll down and see how some of these things are made and just kind of become better aware of all of the different attributes and ways that we can structure a form. So when you go into your actual code, okay, what we can do is to first put a form into life. Room here, and what we do is you first need to enter actually a form tag. Okay, and in a form tag, you generally have three common attributes. You have class. We're not going to do a whole lot with these yet, but it is good practice to have them there. Class, action, and method attributes. Those are three common things because we're going to use them more and more when we start learning JavaScript. All right. So that starts our form, which means we want to end our form at some point. Okay. For now, you can just leave these blank, but we always want to have these three things. All right. The next thing that we can put in would be if we have a form. What this does is this opens and says, okay, everything between here is a form, but we need to have some type of wording and input there. So for example, if you go to the MDN documentation for forms and we go to input, these are all the different types of inputs we can have for a form. Okay, so let's go back to our Replit. And for example, let's say input and unfortunately Replit doesn't have autocomplete, so I got to remember everything. Type. Gotta look. Not number, name. Name equals and value. These are for an input. These are our three main attributes for an input tag. Okay. Now, whatever you put in the so for type, okay, this is going to be the attribute that determines what type of input you're actually going to have show up on the screen. So you want a text box, put text, right? You want a checkbox, you'll put something else. And we'll do some examples of this here in a second. But so let's do this. All right, let's see what happens when we do the text attribute. Run. Yeah, a little text box shows up. Right? You can type stuff in it. Da, 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 da. But that is about all we can do. So we want to actually give this a label normally. If it's going to show up on the page, we want people to actually know why there's a text box there. So before that input, let's actually put a label. So we're going to open a label tag. We could say your name. We got to close that label. All right, let's run it. Refresh. Hey, there we go. Your name, and then Josh. All right. Now we can do a whole bunch of other stuff with this. Okay, maybe that wouldn't really do a whole lot for us because normally there's some type of submit. So we can actually add another input. Let's just take this guy. And then remember, if I change the type attribute right here to something else, then that's going to change what shows up. So if I do submit, well, it made this little clicky button, but notice there's nothing actually written there in the button. So I need to give this, I can play around with this and find which one of these attributes makes something show up on the button. Now, name is actually, we're giving a name to whatever the person puts in there. So that's not exactly it, but value, yeah. And notice now this says submit. Okay. Now if we click it, nothing really happens because we haven't told the computer to actually do something with it. Okay, but yeah. So honestly, from here you just start getting, looking at all the different input types on MDN. So we were at the page for forms, and we can scroll down to the related topics and look at inputs. And that's where all these different types, right? All of these different type attributes can show up. So for example, color. Okay, if we put color in there. Let's do it before the submit button. And then we can change the type to color. And what this does is it makes a color picker show up. So if you, if you wanted a form where somebody picks their favorite color and submits it, right? You can click that. It's going to bring up a different color picker. You can choose a color and then hit submit. There is also a checkbox. So for example, on a checkbox, that could be a type of, if you're asking somebody a question, like in the list, close that label, and then the input would be literally, I can look it up and it's the input is just the word checkbox. When we go back and refresh our page, now do you want to join the mailing? We can have a little checkbox that okay, now this is on the same line because we haven't actually told it to do anything yet. All of these things are written out and we haven't put any line breaks. So if I want this to show up on the next line, I need to put a line break after the submit button. So when I run that and refresh, okay, after the submit button, I put a line break so it skips down to the next line. Okay. The one thing I forgot to do right here is, so we opened our form element, right? We put all these labels and different input types and stuff like that. The one thing, I didn't forget. Still got a closed form. Thought I forgot to put that in. All right. So what you guys are going to do now is you're going to go to Replit. And you're going to go to the class assignments, and in the assignments, you're going to make just a page where you have at least 10 different examples of things like this, where you have a little description and then what the submission button or what the thing is, right? So here is a preview of what your assignment's going to look like. Okay, your job is, you're watching the video right now, your task is to complete and make at least 10 different types of inputs on this form with a little description of what they are. So I put a picture here of some random ones that you can mess around with. But remember, if you go to MDN and look at the documentation for stuff, there are way more than 10. So I recommend you play around with it and just kind of change the input types, see what types of things you can do, what you can mess around with. And then just when you have 10 ones that you like, go ahead and turn that in, and then come on back to the video because we are going to actually do something else. So go do that, pause the video, go do your Replit assignment, and then I will see you back here when you are done. All right, so this woman makes videos that are way better than mine. So for the little kind of sum up at the end, we're going to watch her stuff, and then we will move on to the next part. All right, here we go.
Now let's just quickly review what we've learned about HTML forms. We use the form tag to define what should go into our form, and this by itself doesn't actually do anything. So in order for the form to do anything, you'll need two important HTML elements, and that's the label and the input. And between the opening and closing label tags, write some text that will be displayed as a label inside your form. The next most important HTML element that's associated with forms are the inputs. And the input is a self-closing tag, so it doesn't have a closing tag. Instead, you define the input type by using the type attribute. And there's a whole bunch of input types that you can tap into to use inside your form. For example, in this case, the type is set to text. So we get a text box where the user can input their name. But you can also use an input element that has the type attribute set as submit, and this creates a button. So you can see that by setting the attribute type various predefined keywords, you actually end up with completely different things on your website. And it might seem strange that even though we're using the same HTML element, i.e. the input, we're actually getting completely different objects on our website. Anywhere from text boxes to buttons to color pickers and a myriad array of different things that we can create just by changing that text and submit input types. Have a look at the MDN docs, you'll see that there's loads more different keywords that you can use. For example, the input type where you allow the user to upload a file, or the date picker, or the radio button, or a range. And you can see that I've only got static my slide to show you what they look like. But I want you.
What a wonderful lady. All right. So make sure you finish that Replit assignment and then go to the next video because we are going to add a contact form to our personal webpage. All right. So I'll see you guys there.